The sun had barely dipped behind the rooftops of Millstone, New Jersey, when the street fell into an eerie silence. Elm Street, once filled with the smell of backyard grills and the sound of baseball games on old radios, now stood frozen in time. The only light came from the slow, pulsing flash of red and blue patrol lights, casting long shadows against the houses. Uniformed officers lined both sides of the road, standing shoulder to shoulder in salute. No one spoke, no one dared to breathe, and from the far end of the block walked Deputy Calder Morrow, carrying the lifeless body of K9 Fenric in his arms. Fenric had been more than a partner. For Calder, he had become a reason to keep going. They had served together for 6 years, long enough to stop counting the near misses and long nights. Fenric had a rare intelligence, a sense of presence that was almost human. But that night, when chaos erupted during a hostage call, Fenric did what no one else could. He lunged through a shattered window and intercepted the armed suspect before he could harm the children hiding inside. Calder remembered the sound of the shot, just one, and then silence. Calder hadn't spoken since. His usually sharp jaw was clenched tight, his eyes focused on nothing and everything at once. As he carried Fenric down the center of the street, each step was deliberate, heavy, almost ritualistic. The other officers, veterans and rookies alike, remained still, saluting their fallen brother. Behind them, civilians watched in reverent quiet. Some wore black, others held hands over their hearts. All of them had known Fenric. He had been the town's silent guardian. Among the crowd was Mrs. Vesper Llewellyn, whose missing grandson had once been found by Fenric deep in the woods on a winter night. She wept openly, her delicate hands shaking. Near her stood Alaric and Sibylla Morven, whose antique store Fenric had saved during a late-night break-in. These weren't just people in attendance. They were lives he had touched, families he had protected. Fenric wasn't just a dog. He was Millstone's hero. Calder's arms felt heavier with every step, not from Fenric's body, but from the guilt pressing on his chest. Why hadn't he gone in first? Why had he hesitated for that one split second? The unanswered questions gnawed at him. The crowd watched as he passed, the silence broken only by the sound of his boots on pavement, and the low murmur of grief carried by the evening breeze. At the end of the line stood his patrol SUV, door open, waiting. As Calder reached it, one of the officers behind him stepped out of formation, removing his cap, eyes locked onto Calder's. Something was coming, something that no one was prepared for. If today's chapter moved you and you want to see Calder and Fenric's memory honored, leave a like and subscribe to the channel right now. Let's hit 100,000 subscribers together and keep sharing these powerful stories. Officer Nolan Creed stepped out of line, his hat pressed tightly against his chest. His eyes, usually steady and unreadable, shimmered under the flickering patrol lights. Calder Morrow stiffened, feeling the shift in the air. Every step Nolan took forward seemed to ripple through the crowd. Behind him, other officers began to stir, some pulling small items from their pockets, others reaching into their uniforms. Calder blinked, confused, his arms tightening instinctively around Fenric's still form. What was happening? One by one, the officers approached. They carried strips of black cloth, some torn from old uniforms, others neatly cut. In silence, they tied the fabric to the handles of their sidearms, their badges, even the antennas of their radios. It was an old tradition, one Calder had only heard about from the oldest veterans. A silent oath to the fallen, a vow to carry on in their honor. No orders had been given, no plan had been spoken, yet every officer understood. Calder's throat tightened as he realized. They were mourning not just a colleague, but a brother. The civilians followed. Mrs. Vesper Llewellyn stepped forward first, her silver hair catching the light like a halo. She knelt beside Fenric's body, whispering something too soft for anyone to hear, before tying a small handkerchief, embroidered with tiny blue flowers, around the handle of Calder's belt. The Morvens were next. Alaric removed a faded ribbon from around his wrist, a token from his late wife, and looped it carefully around Calder's radio. Each gesture felt like a blessing, a burden, and a thank you woven into one. Calder wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words stuck like thorns in his throat. Every fiber of his being screamed that he didn't deserve this honor, that he had failed Fenric in the most crucial moment. And yet, here they were, honoring both of them. The lines stretched down the block now, people waiting in the chilly night air to offer a piece of themselves to the fallen K9. The night smelled of rain on asphalt, old leather, and grief too heavy to name. The procession continued until Calder stood beneath the halo of a streetlight, bathed in its cold, artificial glow. In his arms, Fenric seemed almost at peace, his body swaddled now in layers of tokens and memories. Calder closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a ragged breath. He had never believed in omens or signs, but in that moment, he could almost feel Fenric's spirit beside him, loyal, proud, and unbroken. A low hum began to rise from the crowd, a sound like wind, but heavier, more human. It took Calder a moment to realize. They were singing, a hymn from long ago, soft and aching. As the first haunting notes drifted up into the night sky, Calder turned toward the SUV. But before he could move, a young boy broke free from the crowd, running toward him with something clutched in his hand, something that would change everything. The boy couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, his red sneakers pounding against the pavement as he rushed toward Calder. His cheeks were flushed with emotion, a messy swirl of tears and determination on his young face. In his small hand, he clutched a heavy object that glinted under the patrol lights. Calder instinctively tightened his arms around Fenric, unsure whether to step back or kneel. But something in the boy's desperate expression rooted him to the spot. When the boy reached him, he stopped abruptly, panting hard. Without hesitation, he thrust out his hand, revealing a tarnished medal attached to a faded blue ribbon. It was old, its engravings worn smooth by time. Calder glanced down and immediately recognized the shape. It was a silver star, a decoration for gallantry that could only have come from a place of sacrifice. The boy's voice trembled when he finally spoke. "It was my grandpa's. He fought in Vietnam. He always said heroes deserve to be remembered. Please, he would have wanted Fenric to have it." The weight of the gesture hit Calder harder than any bullet could have. His hands shook as he knelt slowly, careful not to jostle Fenric's body. With a reverence reserved for sacred things, he allowed the boy to pin the medal onto Fenric's vest, right over his heart. For a long moment, the world seemed to pause. The air grew thick, every breath heavy and meaningful. Calder found himself staring into the boy's wide, tearful eyes, seeing not just grief, but an unbroken chain of courage stretching back through generations. Behind the boy, his mother stood silently, a hand over her mouth, her own eyes brimming. Calder felt a sob building inside him, a painful lump that refused to be swallowed. He bowed his head, overcome. Fenric's body now bore the legacy of a soldier, a warrior who had given everything for others. Calder realized, with a sudden, raw clarity, that Fenric's sacrifice was bigger than the moment of his death. It was stitched into the fabric of the town itself, into every life he had touched, into every heart now silently breaking under the weight of goodbye. The hymn continued in the background, rising and falling like a tide. Calder stood slowly, carrying Fenric with a newfound solemnity. He turned toward the waiting SUV, every step a farewell and a promise. The door was still open, the inside lit softly by the dashboard lights. Calder approached it, but just as he reached the vehicle, the police radio crackled to life, a dispatch call cutting through the night with startling sharpness. Another emergency, another cry for help. Life, it seemed, would not wait for grief to finish its work. Calder hesitated, one foot inside the patrol SUV, when a hand landed gently on his shoulder. He turned to see Chief Eleanor Wren, her weathered face stern but her eyes impossibly soft. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The look she gave him carried a message he understood all too well. Take your time, but know that the town still needs you. Calder swallowed hard, glancing once more at Fenric, the metal gleaming faintly against the dark fabric. Somehow, he would find the strength to carry on. But first, they would honor their fallen hero properly. The funeral arrangements for K9 Fenric moved faster than Calder could comprehend. It seemed the entire town had mobilized overnight, each person determined to play a part. Millstone had seen its share of loss over the years, but nothing quite like this. This wasn't just a police funeral. This was a farewell to a protector, a companion, a symbol of everything the town wanted to believe still existed: loyalty, courage, unconditional love. Calder sat in the front pew of the small town chapel, Fenric's service vest folded carefully on his lap, his fingers tracing its worn patches over and over. Outside, a line of cars stretched for blocks, headlights flickering like a river of light winding through the streets. Calder could hear the murmuring of the crowd gathering beyond the church doors. Friends, strangers, entire families clutching handmade signs and flowers. The mayor had ordered the flags flown at half-staff, and businesses all across town had posted Fenric's picture in their windows with handwritten notes of thanks. Calder felt the crushing weight of it all pressing down on him. The love, the loss, the responsibility of carrying Fenric's memory forward. Chief Eleanor Wren stood at the podium, her voice steady but laden with emotion as she spoke of Fenric's service. She recounted his countless rescues, his unshakable bravery, and the moments of quiet companionship he had offered officers after long, punishing shifts. Calder listened, each word slicing deeper into the ache inside him. Every story was a reminder of how much had been given, and how much had been lost. He wasn't sure how he would ever fill the hollow space Fenric had left behind. As the service ended, Eleanor called for the final tribute. Officers rose in unison, their boots striking the floor in a synchronized rhythm that echoed through the chapel like a heartbeat. Two officers approached Calder with a velvet box. Inside it, gleaming under the faint light, was a Medal of Valor awarded posthumously to Fenric. Calder rose to accept it, his hands trembling as he clutched the medal to his chest. A knot tightened in his throat when he realized it wasn't just a medal for Fenric. It was a reminder that some sacrifices deserved to be remembered for generations. The procession began with Calder carrying Fenric's vest and the boy's silver star pinned atop it. Officers, firefighters, paramedics, and even members of the community formed a slow-moving line behind him. Each carried a small candle, their flames flickering against the gathering twilight. It was called the Procession of Light, a tradition the town hadn't used in decades, reserved only for its greatest heroes. As they walked, soft hymns played from old speakers lining the streets, each note heavier than the last. Somewhere along the route, Calder caught sight of the boy again, the one who had given Fenric the silver star. He was walking with his mother, a candle clutched tightly in his small hand. Their eyes met briefly, and Calder felt something shift inside him. A fragile seed of hope, sprouting in the midst of his grief. But before he could fully process it, the parade turned toward the town's memorial square, where a massive black granite monument awaited, and what he saw there made his breath catch painfully in his chest. The town's memorial square had always been a quiet place, a stretch of manicured grass bordered by stone benches and an old iron fountain. But tonight, under the low hum of solemn conversation and the soft glow of candles, it felt almost sacred. At the center of the square stood something new, a massive black granite slab, freshly polished, with a tarp draped carefully over its surface. Calder's breath hitched when he saw it, a lump of disbelief forming in his throat. He hadn't heard about this. No one had. Somehow, in less than 24 hours, the town had prepared a permanent tribute. Chief Wren took her place beside the covered monument, her expression unreadable but her hands visibly trembling. Calder found himself drifting closer, carried forward by the momentum of the crowd. The boy with the silver star stood near the front, still gripping his candle like a lifeline. A hush fell over the square as Eleanor spoke, her voice carrying just enough to reach the outermost edges of the gathering. "Tonight," she said, "we don't just mourn. We remember. We honor." Her hand reached out and, with one sharp tug, pulled the tarp free. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chiseled into the stone, larger than life, was an engraving of K9 Fenric. Every detail had been painstakingly captured. The proud set of his jaw, the fierce intelligence in his eyes, the loyalty etched into his very posture. Above the image, bold silver letters spelled out, K9 Fenric, Protector, Brother, Hero. Beneath it, smaller script read, He gave all so that others could live. Calder stared, unblinking, feeling tears he could no longer hold back spill down his face. The boy was the first to step forward. He placed his candle at the base of the monument, the flickering flame reflecting off the polished stone like a heartbeat. One by one, others followed. Officers, townsfolk, children clutching teddy bears, veterans in worn uniforms. Each placed a candle, a flower, a token of remembrance. Calder moved without thinking, his body numb but his heart pounding in his ears. When he knelt to place Fenric's vest at the foot of the monument, he whispered a few broken words only Fenric could have understood. You kept your promise. I'll keep mine. As Calder rose, he felt a hand slip into his, small, warm, trembling. He looked down to see the boy, the silver star still pinned proudly to his own jacket. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Calder gave the boy's hand a gentle squeeze, grounding himself in the only thing that made sense anymore. Carrying Fenric's spirit forward, through service, through sacrifice, through love. Just as the last candle was placed, the town's old bell tower began to chime, its solemn toll cutting through the night. Calder looked up at the sky, now a deep indigo strewn with stars. Somewhere out there, he believed, Fenric was still standing watch. And yet, as beautiful as the tribute was, something still gnawed at Calder's heart. A lingering feeling that Fenric's story wasn't finished yet. Before the story continues, we want to know, if you were there at that emotional tribute, what would you leave at the base of the monument to honor K9 Fenric? Share your answer in the comments. The days that followed the memorial were a blur of muted conversations and half-finished condolences. Calder returned to work sooner than anyone expected, unable to bear the silence of his own home. Every corner of the station held memories of Fenric, the worn mat where he used to nap, the scratches on Calder's office door from Fenric's eager paws. Grief, Calder realized, wasn't loud. It was a slow, constant pressure, like water carving stone, wearing him down in ways he couldn't see but could feel in every breath. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold, Calder sat alone in the K9 unit's training field. The field had once been a place of excitement. Obstacle courses, scent trails, long afternoons of camaraderie. Now it felt like a hollow relic. He absent-mindedly tossed an old training ball into the grass, watching it roll to a stop. Without Fenric racing after it, the field seemed lifeless, a stage missing its star performer. Chief Wren found him there, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a thin manila folder in the other. She sat beside him without speaking, passing him the thermos with a quiet nod. After a long silence, she placed the folder on his lap. Calder hesitated before opening it. Inside were photographs and a thin dossier, the profile of a young, unassigned K9 named Valor, a shepherd mix pup with piercing, intelligent eyes. Calder felt his chest tighten. He wasn't ready. He might never be. Fenric wasn't replaceable. Wren seemed to read his hesitation without him saying a word. Fenric would want you to, she said gently. You trained him to be more than just a partner. You trained him to believe in something bigger than himself. That's something only you can pass on. Calder stared at the photo of Valor, his heart warring between loyalty to Fenric's memory and the pull of unfinished duty. Grief and hope tangled inside him, messy and impossible to separate. The next afternoon, Calder found himself standing outside the small kennel on the edge of town. Valor watched him through the chain-link fence, tail low but wagging slightly, ears perked with cautious curiosity. Calder knelt, reaching through the fence with an open hand. Valor approached slowly, sniffing, then pressing his head against Calder's palm. The connection was tentative, fragile, nothing like the effortless bond he had shared with Fenric. And yet, something stirred in Calder's heart. A flicker of possibility, a whisper that maybe healing didn't mean forgetting. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the training field, Calder unlocked the kennel and let Valor out. The young dog bounded into the open space, awkward and energetic. Calder watched him for a moment, then followed, a small, determined smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The past would always be a part of him, of them both, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to start building something new. Training Valor was nothing like training Fenric had been. Calder realized it almost immediately. Where Fenric had been composed and methodical from the start, Valor was a whirlwind of raw energy and restless curiosity. Every command felt like a negotiation. Every session tested Calder's patience, his instincts, and, more painfully, his heart. But each time he considered giving up, he would catch a glimpse of Valor's bright, eager eyes, and something inside him refused to quit. The first official training day began under a gray, overcast sky. Calder stood at the edge of the familiar K9 field, ball cap pulled low over his brow, watching as Valor zigzagged across the grass, chasing butterflies instead of focusing on scent trails. Other officers leaned on the fence, exchanging skeptical glances. No one said it aloud, but Calder knew what they were thinking. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe Valor wasn't cut out for this work. Calder tightened his fists at his sides, forcing himself to believe otherwise. He owed it to Fenric and to himself not to surrender to doubt. Progress was slow and uneven. Valor would perform perfectly one moment, then lose focus entirely the next. Calder found himself talking to Fenric under his breath, asking for patience, asking for guidance, as if his old partner could somehow hear him. On the toughest days, Calder would sit alone on the field after the others had gone home, tossing the worn training ball into the empty grass, the silence pressing in like a second skin. It was on one of those evenings that something shifted. Calder set up a basic obstacle course, just to give Valor something to burn energy on. He didn't expect anything extraordinary. But as Calder whistled and pointed toward the first hurdle, Valor locked eyes with him, tail wagging low, muscles coiled with anticipation. And then, in one beautiful, fluid motion, Valor sprinted across the field, leaping the hurdles, weaving through the cones, hitting every mark without hesitation. Calder stood frozen, heart pounding. For the first time, Valor wasn't distracted. He was working for Calder with Calder. When Valor skidded to a halt in front of him, panting heavily but smiling in that wide, joyful way dogs do, Calder dropped to his knees and buried his face in Valor's thick fur. Pride and sorrow tangled together in his chest, and for a long moment, he just stayed there, letting the emotions wash over him. Maybe it wasn't about replacing Fenric. Maybe it was about honoring what they had built by building something new. From the far side of the field, Chief Wren watched quietly, her arms folded, a rare, approving smile touching her face. She knew better than anyone. Healing didn't happen all at once. It was stitched together moment by moment, victory by small victory. As Calder rose, clapping Valor's side, a new resolve hardened inside him. There were missions ahead, and when they came, he and Valor would face them together. The call came just as the rain began to fall harder. A missing child, last seen near the woods. Calder clipped Valor's vest on tightly, feeling the young dog's restless energy thrumming under his fingers. "We do this together," he whispered, then swung into the patrol SUV, speeding into the storm without looking back. The woods were already thick with mist by the time they arrived. Calder snapped the lead onto Valor's harness and gave a low, firm command, "Find." For a tense moment, Valor hesitated, rain slicking his fur flat. Then he lowered his head and bolted forward, pulling Calder into the darkness without a second thought. It was brutal going. The ground was soft and treacherous, every step a risk. Calder pushed on, barely able to see 10 feet ahead. Branches clawed at his arms, and mud sucked at his boots. Valor wove through the trees, nose to the ground, tail rigid with focus. They stumbled across a child's toy, a small bear, waterlogged and abandoned, but Valor didn't stop. He had the scent. Minutes stretched into aching hours. Calder's legs burned. His breath came in ragged gasps. Still, Valor pulled him onward, refusing to let the trail die. Then, without warning, Valor barked sharply and darted to the left, disappearing into a thicket. Calder crashed after him, heart hammering. Through the brush, he spotted a tiny figure curled under a fallen tree. The missing boy, shivering, soaked, but alive. Calder rushed forward, wrapping his jacket around the child's frail frame. Valor stayed close, barking to alert the others. Calder's fingers trembled as he radioed for help, waves of relief and exhaustion flooding him all at once. When the rescue team arrived, Calder barely registered their approach. He sat in the mud, holding the boy close, Valor pressed protectively at their side. Calder ruffled the dog's ears, feeling the rough fur under his fingertips, a silent thank you passing between them. Walking back through the misty woods, Calder understood something deeper than grief. Valor wasn't a replacement. He was a continuation. A bridge between the life Calder had lost and the life still worth fighting for. The ache for Fenric remained, sharp and aching, but hope had started to grow quietly around it. Calder knew now, Fenric would never truly be gone. Not as long as loyalty, courage, and love moved forward through new steps and new paws. The story of the rescue spread through Millstone faster than Calder could have imagined. By the next morning, Valor's name was on every local news channel, his photo shared across town and beyond. But Calder didn't feel pride, not exactly. What he felt was something deeper, more private. A sense of fulfillment, a quiet voice telling him he was finally honoring Fenric's legacy the way it deserved. At the police station, the atmosphere had shifted. Officers who once gave Valor skeptical glances now greeted him with claps on the side and easy smiles. Civilians brought treats, handwritten notes, even drawings from schoolchildren. Valor took it all in with a wagging tail and a tongue ready to lick every hand offered to him. Calder watched it unfold with a heavy heart that felt, finally, a little lighter. One afternoon, Chief Wren called Calder into her office. Sitting on her desk was a polished wooden box with a new badge inside, a K9 badge engraved with Valor's name and service number. She slid it across the desk without saying a word. Calder picked it up carefully, his fingers tracing the etched letters. There was no ceremony, no speeches, just a silent understanding between them. The torch had been passed. Later that evening, Calder found himself back at the memorial square. The black granite monument of Fenric stood bathed in soft light, candles and fresh flowers scattered around its base. Calder crouched down, Valor sitting quietly beside him, and placed Valor's new badge at the foot of the stone for a moment of silent tribute. "I hope you're proud," Calder whispered into the cool night air. The breeze stirred the candles, and Calder almost imagined he could feel Fenric there. Strong, steady, watching over them both. Maybe it wasn't imagination at all. Maybe some bonds never really broke. They just changed form, like light bending but never disappearing. As Calder stood to leave, he noticed the boy from the rescue standing near the edge of the square, his mother's hand resting protectively on his shoulder. The boy held up a simple handmade sign, "Thank you, Valor." Calder smiled and gave a small, respectful nod. Valor barked once, as if understanding the gratitude meant for both of them. Walking away under the stars, Calder realized that the road ahead would still have its dark moments, its struggles and losses. But now he knew he wouldn't be walking it alone. Beside him trotted Valor, new but connected, carrying forward a bond that was unbreakable, stitched together by sacrifice, loyalty, and a love that could never die. And somewhere just beyond the reach of the living, Calder knew Fenric was still there, tail wagging proudly, leading them onward into whatever came next. The seasons shifted gently over Millstone, and with them, Calder's life found a new rhythm. Days once filled with silence were now shared with the steady presence of Valor. Every mission, every call, every quiet drive home deepened the bond between them. Valor wasn't a replacement for Fenric. He was a continuation, a new story written on the foundation of old love and sacrifice. The town had embraced them both. The memorial square became a place of comfort, not sorrow. People left flowers, dog toys, handwritten notes. Calder often visited late at night, Valor at his side, sitting in the soft glow of the monument lights. It wasn't just about remembering Fenric anymore. It was about carrying forward what he had stood for. One clear evening, Calder stood once more before Fenric's monument, a small metal plaque in his hand. It read simply, "Together, always." He knelt down and placed it beneath Fenric's engraving, running his fingers across the cool stone. The past no longer weighed him down. It lived within him, stitched into every breath, every step forward. "Thank you," Calder whispered, feeling the breeze lift the edges of the candles placed around the base. Valor leaned gently against him, offering silent comfort. Calder smiled, brushing his hand over the dog's thick fur. The ache of loss was still there, but now it was softer, a memory wrapped in gratitude instead of pain. As they turned to leave, Calder paused to look back one last time. In the quiet night, with the stars blinking overhead, he could almost see Fenric's shape, proud and strong, standing watch by the monument. It wasn't a goodbye. It never had been. It was a promise fulfilled. Walking through the empty streets, Valor's steady steps matched Calder's, side by side. The darkness ahead didn't feel as heavy anymore. With each beat of their footsteps, Calder carried Fenric's spirit forward, not in mourning, but in purpose, in courage, in loyalty that would never die. Because heroes like Fenric don't just leave footprints. They leave legacies, and those legacies walk beside us always. If this story touched you, leave a like and subscribe for more emotional stories like this one.